Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Scoop. Scoop is a British biographical drama that provides a dramatic retelling of the BBC's process of securing an interview with Prince Andrew concerning his relationship with convicted sex offender and trafficker Jeffrey Epstein in the wake of his arrest and eventual death. It provides a behind-the-scenes look into the women who negotiated with Buckingham Palace to obtain one of the biggest media scoops in British history that resulted in the downfall of a member of British royalty, while also exploring the struggles that journalists face in their line of work. As a journalism student, I was intrigued to see this movie, and I'm happy with how it was pulled off. Though there's a few odd choices done with its story, it remains a gripping account to the build-up of one of the most disastrous interviews ever for a subject, as well as a meaningful examination of the hustle that journalists have to endure. If there was a main character for this story, I'd say it was Sam McAllister, who's played by Billie Piper. She's a captivating investigator who has to jump through a lot of hoops just to get the recognition she wants as a journalist, which makes it easy to root for her as she fights to get the story that she wants. I enjoyed seeing how determined she was in overcoming every obstacle that was in her way, but also how she's humanized with her family background and how she visually struggles to cope with pressures placed on her by her workplace. She's not necessarily a deep character per se, but she's still relatable and gives the story structure. This being said, I wasn't always sure who was supposed to be the main focus of the story, because the movie tended to bounce back and forth between multiple characters. McAllister felt like the protagonist, but she doesn't feel as prominent as she should be until the first act is almost over. There were a lot of characters in this movie that didn't add much to the story. I know for a story of this scale, not everyone is going to be essential to it, but I was surprised at how many filler roles there were here, especially with the Buckingham Palace staff. I felt like the movie had more in store for the Prince's communication staff there, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. Now, the more important characters for the story do stand out, the biggest one being Gillian Anderson's role as Emily Maitlis, the woman who interviewed Prince Andrew. She has a fantastic screen presence in this movie, with how she's able to treat her job so casually and yet so seriously at the same time, and it's great to see her empower Sam throughout the movie, which contrasts that of her peers. Rufus Sewell also does a good job in the role of Prince Andrew. Though I don't know how sinister the role should have been, it's interesting to see him as someone who's woefully ignorant of how despised he is by the public for his connection to Epstein, and how he tries to manipulate his way out of his mess, and the makeup effects used to achieve his look are excellent too. So like I said, the central characters are a lot more intriguing than all the other ones that float around the story and only pop up in a scene or two. However, they all have some role to play in the story at some point, and it's this story that ends up being the movie's strongest asset. The process behind something as mundane as setting up an interview is made more intense because of all the surrounding details behind it. Prince Andrew is suspicious, and Buckingham Palace's staff are hesitant to give out any details that'll make the royal family look bad, which makes the investigation behind everything going on that much more captivating. There's a tense atmosphere conveyed from all the hustling Sam and her crew have to do to get the interview set up, which ties well into the sense of urgency often required for journalism work to tell the most current and up-to-date news. The pacing does flip back and forth a bit, but it makes sense due to the unpredictability of the job. Whenever an opportunity presents itself, everyone at BBC has to jump on it before it's lost, and even then the odds are still against them, because it's a couple of journalists versus a body as immense and protected as the royal family, and it drew me in to see how Sam and her crew would overcome this challenge. At the same time, there's also challenges in the BBC itself, with how Sam tries to earn her stripes as a journalist, but finds her work continually getting shafted, especially with the Andrew Epstein story when it first starts. This leads into the grim reality that journalism can be, which ties into other issues in journalism as a whole. The constant hustling, the bad job outlook, and the need for recognition are just some of the problems Sam and others experience in this movie. While I'm still only a student, I've already seen a lot of this stuff on the outside looking in, and I appreciated how this movie authentically represents these issues and uses them to make the story more engaging. Speaking of authenticity, while it portrays journalism itself accurately enough, the story itself is more of a dramatic retelling than a completely factual account of events. I like how the movie is honest in its approach to storytelling, without totally shying away from the dark subject matter that's involved between Andrew and his ties to Epstein. However, I do think the movie could have gone further with its subject matter than it did. I know it's not the main focus of the story, and the filmmakers do have to be careful with how they represent events, but based on how the opening scene was done, I think it'd have been great to lean more on that dark side and make Prince Andrew out to be more of a power-drunk scumbag instead of the ignorant oaf he is here. But as it is now, the story is still absorbing and appropriately suspenseful in presentation. It's great to see Sam slowly win the trust of both her colleagues and Buckingham Palace staff, and how events build up over time, which eventually leads to the interview itself. I'm not going to give away too much about this this scene mostly because it's portrayed pretty much the same as the real-life interview itself, but I loved it. It's a masterclass of thriller cinema with how events lead up to it and how much better the payoff ends up being for this build-up. And on that note, man, did Prince Andrew ever botch that interview or what? It really is true what people say about how much of a disaster it ended up being. I almost couldn't believe the words I was hearing come out of Andrew's mouth in response to Mateless's questions, which is made even stranger by the fact that he actually said these things. The movie doesn't show the whole interview for the sake of runtime, but man, was it ever worth the wait. Everything about this movie is presented effectively on both a narrative and technical level. The tight editing, sleek production design, and creative cinematography are perfectly indicative of the raw and real nature of journalism, and it all combines to make an already riveting story even more so. It's always interesting to see the parallels between journalists and communicators and the battles of wit they engage in, though in this case, it's obvious who's in the right here. Bringing truth to power to help inspire change is a goal that should be pursued no matter how tough the odds are, and I commend the work of the journalists involved in this story, as well as the filmmakers behind this film for reaffirming its relevance. Overall, Scoop is a great dramatic thriller that succeeds in portraying the hard work involved in chasing stories and the rewards that can come from it. If you like biographical dramas and are itching to watch a good journalism-related story, you should check this one out. There are some things that could have been done better about it, but the suspenseful and stylish presentation, along with the performances of its main characters, ultimately make it work. It's an important story to tell, both for what it covers and how it represents journalism, and it goes to show how much someone's drive can make a difference, not just with getting a scoop, but what can happen after it. What did you think about this movie? Did you think it was a worthy retelling of events, or did you find some issues with it? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Scoop. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Italian romance, The Tearsmith. Bye bye!